Today we've got Rory Felton with us. Rory, you've done a lot of things in the world, and we're really stoked to talk about specifically Miltia Group because Miltia Group was a record label that has been important for Cullen and I. A lot of the bands that we grew up listening to were bands on Miltia Group, and so super stoked to talk about that. Super stoked to talk about all the work that you do in the music industry. You're not necessarily. Have you been an artist ever before in your life? Like, are you one of those
Only
people
as
that's
like
like
a
been in a band?
only when I was like a young teenager. I was
Okay.
16 when I realized I couldn't really write music. So that's when I started putting out records for bands. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're super fascinated by like that side of the industry, kind of the more business side of the industry.
Sure.
Obviously,
Yeah.
some people kind of, there's always contention between the artist and the music, the business side of it. And
Yeah.
so I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about that. So anyway, we wanted to bring you on, talk about kind of your involvement in the music world, especially music that Cullen and I grew up with. So we're super
Sure.
stoked to have you on,
Yeah.
man.
Thanks for having me. Music is the only industry I've ever worked in. So I've been doing it for a long time, putting out records for a long time. And fortunately, I still get to work with really exciting up and coming musicians that are just crushing it sometimes. So I love it. Love this space. Where do you guys want to kick off?
Yeah. Well, let's start off at the very beginning. You said that you were in a few bands when you were a kid. How did you get into music? How what made you fall in love with music, and how did you what's the origin for
Yeah,
you to even get involved in all of this?
sure. Sure. So I moved to America in the 90s from Australia. That's where I grew up, my family. Uh,
You're from Australia?
I am.
I do
Yeah,
not hear an
I
accent
know.
whatsoever.
I moved
Although
here
with
when
a name like Rory, that's exactly what I imagined.
Yeah.
I moved here when I was 10, so I didn't keep the accent, but I still have both
Wow.
passports, so I can go back and forth.
That's
Dang.
cool.
So I moved to Kansas City, fell in love with like the local music scene in Kansas City. Grunge and pop punk really fell into like all the local musician scene. Unfortunately, we had a lot of amazing artists locally in KC in the 90s, like Coalesce, Boys Life, Giants Chair, the Get Up Kids, Anniversary. We were right by Omaha, Nebraska, and so like Bright Eyes, The Faint,
Yep.
Cursive, all
Yep.
these cool like indie rock bands, and
Well, and then there are some of the emo like Appleseed Cast I know is somewhere
oh
in
yeah.
Kansas, right?
What's great is they were from Lawrence, and
Right down the road.
when I became a young adult, I got to sign them to my label. So it was
Oh,
cool to grow
that's
up with
right.
them as a teenager in high school and then sign them again, which was kind of fun.
That is neat.
Yeah.
What was
So
what was the main spot there in Kansas that you would go and watch these bands? What was the main hub?
it would change a lot because it was such a small scene, but there was a venue called G Coffee, a venue called El Torion. In Lawrence, Kansas, it was the Bottleneck. That was like the main go-to club where like I think I saw Jimmy Eat World with like 50 kids, in
Oh
1999.
my God.
I snuck into the back door to see Sunday Real Estate carrying one of their drum kits, to like, because I was under 18 and they wouldn't let me in the front door. So all that type of stuff. And loved music and played in bands as a teenager and was like, I'm going to start a record label, not having any idea what that meant. I just thought it sounded cool in high school to do that. So I somehow connected with my buddy Jason, who lived in Louisville, and together we signed a project for this band called the Juliana Theory that went on to Tooth and Nail and later to Sony. And we got to put out that first EP with Dawson High. It was a split EP. I was 16, and this was my first experience trying to manufacture a CD, call record stores, call distributors, just trying to figure out how you distribute music in 1998. And fast forward to year 2000, I moved out to LA to go to school at USC to study music industry and was kind of bored my freshman year and was like, I want to start another record label, but as a business, not a hobby. And fortunately, was able to get a little bit of a bank loan with my parents' help and signed 5 artists and co-founded with my with Chad, who was doing booking at the time. And together we formed the Miltia Group record label.
Wow.
And we signed our first 5 artists, which were bands like Rufio, Noise Ratchet, were part of those first ones. Rufio, to this day, their catalog does extremely well. Noise Ratchet got signed to American Records, which was Rick Rubin's label, and then broke up.
Wow.
But we had these bands like go out to Cornerstone Music Festival, which was a music festival in Brent. Are you guys familiar with?
Yeah, for
Cornerstone?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I should preface, I went there like my whole high school life. I went to Cornerstone every
Nice.
year, and that influenced me, sort of like the underground music world there, and that's the music I wanted to work with. So we would have bands come out and play that festival, and
So
all sort of
let's
scene we
can I
were in.
pause you just for a second?
Sure.
How would you find these bands? I
Oh,
mean,
I was just
obviously,
going to
like,
shows.
it's got to
Yeah.
be terrifying knowing that, like, hey, I've got a loan on this. Like, kind of like the first part of my
Oh,
life is riding on signing bands that are going to not
yeah.
only be popular enough, but are going to sell some records. And like, what is that experience like?
Yeah. As an 18-year-old, you don't think about the risk at all. You're just
Oh
having
man,
fun.
I would have been. I would have been. I would have been an anxious mess.
I had zero concept of risk in my life. To be honest, I'm a little bit that way too. But yeah, we just went for it, and we were fortunate in that our first record did really well. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and that allowed me to fund the label.
Was
I
that
left school.
Rufio?
Yeah, it was Rufio was the
Okay.
big one, and then we had some modern. We continued to have success with artists like the Rocket Summer, Copeland, the Appleseed Cast, and we signed artists that didn't do as well, but we did it out of passion, like Dennis and Whitmer and Umbrellas, and a bunch of artists came in sort of the later generation, I say, of the label, like Cartel. That was a big breakout. They went gold. They signed to Sony. A bunch of our records, because our distributor was owned by Sony, we had a partnership with them, and a bunch of our artists ended up in the Sony system as well. And yeah, we ran that label for about 10 years full time. And then, quite frankly, I got a little bit exhausted and burnt out working with artists for 10 years. It's a lot of work to work full time running a label. And, Sony ended up acquiring all the major assets of the label. I was able to keep the catalog and have a bunch of that catalog still to this day. But then, yeah. And then since then, just to give you the short version of that, like I've been just really excited about technology for new artists, and have really been building technology and launching projects that kind of benefit artists either to sell their music and merchandise better on social media, or nowadays it's mostly focused around distribution and publishing admin, which is still a big problem. Music artists often aren't collecting all the royalties that are owed them because of just misunderstanding in the way music rights work.
So obviously, and I was kind of like alluding to this earlier, there has always felt like there's generally a little bit of a tension between the artist and the business people, which obviously in this
Sure.
case you would be kind of one of those business people. And it does seem like in certain situations we have heard from people that like, oh no, that's like a business person that actually really cares about the music and wants the best for the artist. I'm curious kind of like how you've navigated that relationship throughout your history working in the music industry of, wanting these artists to be the best they can be and also like respecting their art. And yeah, I'm just curious, like, how do you maintain that relationship? Because there's times, I'm sure artists are picky and, they're not probably the easiest people to work with or whatever, but you're
Yeah.
still like wanting to be passionate about the music. And I'm sure there are people in the music industry that like literally do not give a shit about the music at all, right? And I would imagine that that's been, especially some of those bigger labels or whatever, they really maybe just like literally just see this as a business and they don't see like the actual art to it or whatever. So anyway, I'm curious how you've navigated that relationship.
Yeah. It's definitely challenging, right? Where, sometimes to the artist, all they see is, something that's owed them per se. And for us, or for a record label, or specifically, I should speak for an independent record label or a small business, you're taking a gamble, right? You're investing capital up front in making a record and marketing a record, and you're hoping and trusting that the artist will support it, will promote it properly on social media, will do everything they do to sort of make the record, give it the best opportunity to be successful, right? And I think where the challenges happen is like, if there's success happening on a record, which is awesome, like when you want to continue to support that with marketing spend in some way, but like what are the limitations to that, right? And that's where sometimes tension can arise, or on like future records, right? So typically, in a record contract, at least what we were doing in the early 2000s, and I think is more the standard now, is we would advance an artist a certain amount of money to make a record, but we would have these options to pick up future records. And sometimes an artist might want to do a future record with a different label for a variety of reasons. They might feel like they're getting more attention, or they might feel like they're get a better look. But because of the agreement they've signed, and the investment that the company's made, they have a right to, support that investment and get a return on that investment. So it's always a challenge. I think for me at this stage of my life, it's really just being completely transparent and upfront with artists about what deals look like, making sure they understand all the terms so that they don't misunderstand something they're signing.
Sure.
I oftentimes at this role in my career, like artists will bring deals to me that they get offered and they ask me to review them. And I'm fortunately
That's
sort
cool.
of able to point to them where the bodies are buried, right? Deep in agreements that they
Can
take
you
out. Yeah.
can you give us kind of a rundown of maybe like the greatest horror show contract you've seen that just absolutely screwing over the artist?
I mean, where those really come from are mainly the major record labels. And this is really hard to say. Like, I don't want to use words like screw over, because this is one of these things where I'm like, your artists are adults. Let's remember, they're entering into a legal agreement that they receive counsel on from an attorney on what it means, or at least they're stating that they have when they sign these agreements, right? So when I hear the word, like, I understand, like, we could use that word kind of screwy deals, but like, it's all leverage, right? What's beautiful about 2023 more than ever before in the music industry is an independent artist can create real audiences and real revenue and real sales completely without a record label. And that increases their leverage if they ever want to transition inside a system, right? So now, if they are to sign to a independent label or a major label, like, oftentimes they've created so much traction that they might have almost outpaced an indie label. Like, there's nothing really an independent label could do for them that they couldn't do for themselves, just because of the response to the creative art. Like, it's just subjective, the way people have responded to the music. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, you had to sign to a label, any kind of label, just to get your records into stores. Like, there was no, Good Morning Music or DistroKid to get your music into Best Buy. Like, you had to go through a label. So now more than ever is the best time in history to be a musician, which is wonderful. And that means we do have a huge amount of volume of music coming out, but I still think, like, great art transcends and great music can connect with people. But yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful parts about the era today. Back then, me and the counterparts I worked with in the independent music industry, none of us were getting, like, stupid rich, right? So we all did it for the love. Like, even like you mentioned, major labels, like, maybe their business model might be somewhat
shady or maybe
structured in a way that maybe doesn't have, like, long-term win-wins for everyone, right? However, like, the people that work at those companies are often really good people that love music, so it's really hard. Like, the industry does get a bad rep, but there are a lot of people that work in the industry that truly love what they do. Like, people that work in independent music, no one's getting rich. So anyone that works in independent music does it because they love it. It's a lifestyle choice. I've been fortunate in that, I've been able to, see moderate success in this world. But even when you have opportunities to go into a different industry, maybe, and potentially financially do better, you just love music because it is, it's just the thing that just pulls you in. And for better or worse, in my life, I have 25 years of expertise in the industry. I kind of have to keep going in it, fortunately, I love music, so it keeps going.
Yeah. So the perspective that we always hear is from the artist's perspective, because they're the ones with the loudest microphone, audiences, I guess you could say. Yeah, they're the ones. Yeah, they have the audience, right? There is a trend to, like, hear about shady things or things that maybe aren't, like, up to the artist's standard, or things that happened later on that they didn't realize maybe what they were doing. Can you maybe, like, talk about, like, the importance of having that counsel or like someone like yourself that's going to look through this stuff and be like, hey, this is what this means, just so you know, so on and so forth.
Yeah. If there's money changing hands, you absolutely need some sort of counsel. I'd recommend a music attorney that's expertise, right? You can have someone like me who's in your life review it, but I always preface I'm not an attorney. I cannot provide legal advice. I can just give you my insight based on other things I've seen in the industry, right? So that's absolutely important. I think, some of these stories we heard about, in our scene of music, right? Like some of the bigger independent labels that did these deals and these artists complaining about the deals they did. I always heard that they signed the deal like in the back of a van without anyone reviewing it, right? And so you're like, dude, like you're an adult. Again, you're an adult. You have
like, I get they were probably like 21 or 22 years old, but it's like you're still also old enough to enter into a legal agreement like that too.
Right. Yeah, right. And I understand it. Like they're so excited for them. Their dream was to sign to this independent label, and they got big really quick afterwards, and don't realize like, oh, I should have had bigger dreams, right? And so maybe they gave up too much for that smaller dream, and I think that happens sometimes. But I don't know. There's the trade-offs of this, right? Like, would that artist have had the success they had without having done the deal, right? And maybe you're not making the record royalties you could have had if you stayed independent, but you're making way more from touring and merchandising that you wouldn't have made unless your audience was as big because of the label that helped you. So everything's a trade-off. Again, I always just lean on like today's way better for artists. Like the opportunities for artists to get capital, to build up their own career, to build up a balance sheet, to run their art like a business, like an independent label is awesome right now. Like they have so many tools, and that's what I've been thinking about and what we sort of build for in that sake,
So with the music industry changing in that way, like what is the advantage to a record label still? Like why should a record label still exist? Like I want you to be able to like still like advocate for a record label. And I still think record labels are great.
Yeah.
But what is the purpose of a record label if so many artists can likely do a lot of the work that a record label would have in years past been able to do?
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of artists just don't want to do that work, They don't want to be the marketer. They don't want to be the advertiser, right? They don't want to do all this kind of nitty gritty back end stuff, like whether it be delivering one-liners to Pandora or registering songs with Sound Exchange or registering songs for publishing administration, all this like metadata work, like creating a release. I think it's fun, but a lot of artists don't think it's fun when they create it in a system. So all that being said, I think there's always room for marketing expertise. I think that if you find a label partner that can help increase your audience specifically on social media, like awesome, like lean into that, because that seems to be what's driving a lot of nonstop stuff or a lot of growth in the independent music sector, clearly. Other labels, I think just having expertise, like someone guide you and lead your career that's done it before. Someone that's led to success before is going to help you in your career. So that's where I think it's benefit. I also think a lot, the terms are, everything always depends on the terms, right? If you're an artist at a certain tier, it may only make sense for you to do like that indie label made me an offer. Well, as long as it's a one-off record and there's no future commitment, it might be worth trying something like that, right? I actually advise an artist that's crushing it completely independent today to consider doing one record with a really cool indie punk label, just to create that sort of, community association, even if that record stays there. I think that's like you're giving up some upside initially, but you're gaining this long-term platform that you can sort of work within, if that makes sense. I always think there's value to all of that. All that being said, I think that both indie labels and distributors do a lot less than what artists think they do. And so you always have to rely on yourself and your core team, be it, yourself as an artist, maybe you as an artist and a manager, to really do the majority of the work. Unfortunately, a lot of people rely on the artist to lead the change. In fact, I spoke with one artist. They said they had a meeting with an indie label, and the label literally told them, yeah, the marketing is really on you as an artist to promote it through social media. We can't really do anything. So it's almost like the label presented themselves as like a capital solution and a distribution solution, but not really a marketing solution, which I thought was kind of interesting. The world keeps changing.
Right. Well,
So, of those things, which do you think is more important for a record label to be? If you had to pick one, more of the dollars and cents side, or more of the marketing and like getting the name recognition out there side?
Oh, personally, I've never relied on a label partner for marketing, just because I never feel like you really get the attention you're always looking for. So I'd lean on capital. There was an artist we were working with a couple of years ago, and while they wanted to transition to a record label after being independent for some time, the best deal we actually got them was through a distributor. And the reason it was the best deal is because we were able to get them a substantial advance, while allowing them to keep ownership of their masters. And they could use that advance for their own marketing. So it was almost like they had the distributor fund their own label while being able to keep all their upside, which was a great deal. So again, we live in this world where distributors are masquerading as labels, labels are masquerading as distributors, and managers are now masquerading as distributors. Everyone is everything in a little bit of a way, in today's era of music,
like how I feel like the technology piece of how technology changes and how we how we get our music, and because that has changed so much over many decades. I mean, obviously, we start out with like, however people before even record players existed. I don't know how they got music other than it was probably just on a sheet and somebody else played it. And then we get to records, and then you get to eventually CDs, and then now it starts to really heighten where now you get all the online stuff, and there's at that point you get all the illegal downloads that you're having to navigate, and then eventually we get into this world of streaming. So there's just like so much change that happens technologically. Like, how have you been able to, like, how do you navigate that as a record label? Because that seems to be like such a core piece of figuring out how are people getting music now, and how can we tap into that so that we can like make money for ourselves and for the artists?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do a lot of thinking about what's going to happen after the post-streaming era. Like, we're kind of at max streaming. What's next? That gets exciting for me. But yeah, I mean, CDs, what independent artists today don't realize is how hard it was to sell CDs out of the back of your van on tour, and how much money that generated versus the ability to make money from streaming. So as much as artists complain about streaming, and I'm not trying to support the royalty rates, I'm aware they're abysmal. I get paid abysmal rates, but it's probably still better than the CD era as far as economics for independent artists. They probably still have more opportunities to reach a global audience and build a business than they did during the CD era. So I think that's a great thing. Streaming is a double-edged sword. It's like, we all know the challenges with it. I don't know if you guys saw the playlist, the show on Netflix about the founding of Spotify. It's a good watch.
Oh, I need to check that out.
They show it from different perspectives. They show it from the perspective of the founder, Daniel Ek, but also from an artist perspective, developer perspective, and like an investor perspective. And even like a legal perspective of the whole story. It's really well done, because there's all different views on how it happened, and music's challenging. I mean, there was a time, like, transparently, my record label from like 2006 to 2008 dropped like 80% in revenue in this CD transition from CDs to digital downloads to streaming hadn't really come up yet, but downloads were dying because of the torrent world that we lived in. So there was an era from like 2008 till 2011 that I remember, like, I didn't think the industry was going to function the way it did. I thought it was going to be entirely different. And somehow, they made streaming work, and they crushed it. And the major labels just created this massive windfall for themselves. Any label that survived that lull just had a massive windfall from 2012 to today in streaming. They've done extremely well. It's hard to imagine how much money the major labels have made in the last 10 years, 15 years off of that. So streaming is great for them. Streaming is great for the mega artists. I think it's also great for working independent artists, and people will fight me on it, and that's fine. I'm happy to debate it. But again, I compare it to like the era pre-streaming, right? It's like Warren Buffett says about capitalism, like it's not the best system in the world, but I don't know a better system, right? It's like streaming is not the best system in the world, but the way people want to listen to music and experience music, I don't know a better system. I think what artists need to focus on today is creating their core audience that they own their fans, like in emails and phone numbers, separate from social media, separate from streaming, so that they can sell merchandise to them, unique experiences to them, collectibles, digital collectibles. There's all sorts of opportunities that you can monetize your audience once you create that audience. And there's all sorts of stories of artists that may not crush it on streaming, but crush it live. So it can swing all different ways.
Yeah. There also seems to be this, and I find this really interesting, is, I remember being like in 6th grade listening to Under Oath, and very well probably was on like LimeWire and illegally downloading Under Oath albums and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was 12 years old and didn't have money.
Yep.
And now I'm at a point where now I have enough money to where I can buy Under Oath vinyl for $40 or $50 a piece or whatever it is. And I wonder like how much, because the age of your market and because the market and the age of your market changes, and so their life situation is different, where from a 12-year-old that is in school and not making any money, just getting an allowance from my parents once a week, to now I'm like have a salaried job. That's got to be a thing that artists must navigate, of figuring out, okay, who is our core audience, and because of that we can figure out, are we able to make this like financial? Because there are artists probably out there that have millions and millions of streams, but their core audience are like probably like 13-year-old girls that aren't going to pay, like they're only going to ever stream that music. Whereas you could have a band that only has maybe like 50,000 streams on Spotify, but because their audience is like in their 40s or 50s, every single one of those people are going to buy a vinyl. They're going to go to all the shows. And so like actually financially it makes way more sense. So I'm always really curious about like how the market and who that market is probably really affects how we think about like sales and the viability of artists.
Yeah. I mean, we see it today. We see, even though TikTok has become this new like baseball bat in the promotion and marketing game for music. And by the way, there's artists that like, you don't have to do what everyone else is doing on TikTok. Like I see, we work with artists that are creating their own lane entirely on TikTok, doing really humorous, like indie rock content, if you will. So just one, don't think of TikTok as just one thing. It really is a lot of different things in one, but it's incredibly powerful. That being said, I've seen artists get to millions of followers on TikTok and have like very little increase in their streamers. So while their social media audience, or their top of funnel, if you call it, keeps growing, their streaming audience isn't necessarily growing. However, they may also be buying tickets at a more rapid pace than they would be if they didn't have that going on. So that's definitely a big driver. And yes, you're absolutely right. You see artists that may not continue to stream extremely well, maybe some of the classic rock bands, but they can still crush it live and sell lots of tickets. So it's really interesting. There's not a direct overlap between the number of people that stream your music and buy your tickets, or the number of people that follow you on social media and stream your music or buy your tickets. They can all be completely independent of each other.
That's wild. Yeah. It's kind of cool that there's like these different niches for bands to kind of fit into. There's more than one way to make money.
Yes,
there,
there's not.
Right? I mean, I know. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just agreeing. There's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
You can sort of, we have an artist that does 6 figures in syncs. They license their music to film and TV. They don't really make anything off of streaming. They make like minuscules off playing live, but film and TV music is where all their income comes from. So
yeah, that's cool to hear.
That is the reality of music. There's alternative revenue streams. Sometimes you can't count on them or plan on them. Hence why record companies and distributors form, because when you have a volume of content, it allows you to create more of a consistent revenue stream, so you can, cover the cost of just operating these internal systems that can provide a lot of value for thousands of artists at the same time.
Yeah. You alluded to the post-streaming world
Mm.
and like what your thoughts are on it. I am curious to know what you think is next.
So
And this is all like here, like we don't know
yeah,
what
we
it's
don't
going to
know.
be, but maybe you have some inside thoughts, right?
So
Curious what you think.
I'm a futurist at heart too. So I was one of the people that got really excited about the premise of Web3 and what blockchain could bring to the decentralization for music rights, for revenue that flew from music, as well as even like how to monetize music in the digital era outside of streaming. And what I love about the concept of Web3 is you could make a digital product a collectible and make it rare and make it tradable. The problem is the way the technology that supports that Web3 right now is not it's not very robust. It's not very secure. There's a lot of fraud that happens in the space. It's hard to, so it's not fully there. But my hope is within a few years, we might have these ways to, interact with what I'll call digital collectibles with musicians or with artists that are just a little bit more fun and interesting and create new revenue streams outside of just streaming alone. And those digital collectibles might end up just being tickets to shows. They might end up being fan clubs. They might end up being music downloads. We did things like build this virtual space for musicians to show off all their music and videos in sort of one three-dimensional room that you could walk around in. But the interest right now for these products is so minuscule, it's hard to make a real business out of it or justify the investment in fully building them out.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that's coming. And then I think, again, the artists that use these top of funnel channels like TikTok and Instagram and streaming like Spotify to drive their audience into a system that they control, namely like an email list and a messaging list. Because once they have control of their fans, they can control the communication and how to leverage all that.
It's the Louis C.K. Kind of route,
Kinda,
right? Where
yeah.
he owns every single aspect. He even buys out the entire theater from Ticketmaster
Totally.
and controls every aspect of it, right?
Yeah, there's an artist we work with named Violent Vera. She's almost at 1 million monthlies. She's doing a full US tour next year. Her friend with her, like in her team, just booked the tour for her and did just that. They rent venues, and so they make the whole tour. So if you know you're going to sell out venues, you can make so much more money doing that, especially because they don't need a promoter because all our fans follow her on social media anyways. So there's a lot of ways for artists to cut out little middlemen here and there and make more and more money in today's era. And again, the music's not about making money, but when it's so hard to make a living wage in music, like you're stoked if you can increase your revenue 10, 20 grand a year. I was on a strategy call yesterday with an artist and I was like, why haven't you done an acoustic EP? And they're like, oh yeah, I could do that. I'm like, yeah, like throwing an acoustic EP every year or every other year, like you're just going to increase your annual revenue coming into you, like a few grand here, a few grand there. It all adds up. Do a cover song every once in a while. There's playlists dedicated to acoustic covers, like bang one of those out, so we recommend that stuff. And one of the services we offer through Good Morning, I don't mean to do a shout out, but a lot of artists aren't collecting all the royalty streams that are due them, right? And not to be completely conclusive over every single royalty stream, but you're owed royalties for your master rights through your distributor. You're owed royalties called mechanical royalties through your publisher. You're owed public performance royalties through your performing rights organization. You're owed master performance royalties through your Sound Exchange. You're owed neighboring rights royalties that may get collected by Sound Exchange. We don't really know. So my point is, a lot of artists leave money on the table that is owed them. And unfortunately, if they don't collect it in 3 years, it goes into a black box. And that money gets distributed to the businesses in the industry, like the labels and publishers, based on their market share. So the industry is incentivized to hide this information from independent artists. So it's really sad. So if you're an independent artist, you have a breakout song, does like 10 million streams, you're owed in mechanical royalties, maybe $6 grand from that alone, maybe 10 once you calculate the whole global rights, right? But if you don't have a publisher or a publishing administrator, like that money doesn't get collected and it gets ended up paid to the major labels. So it's a wild system, but that's the
Dang.
system that we have. And that's the biggest challenge that I see out there. And so what we try to do is make it easier for artists to collect all their royalties in one place.
Mm-hmm. What are
I
your
like it.
thoughts on vinyl? I remember seeing a few years ago there was something about like vinyl becoming $1 billion industry for the
Oh
first
yeah.
time in like many
Yeah.
years. What do you think's going on there? And do you think there's always going to be that viability for vinyl to be something that helps artists in this industry?
Totally. So I think vinyl is awesome. It's it's a great physical collector piece. You see the younger generation buying it just to show it off on the wall. They don't really even open it. It's like it is a physical collector's item, right? And
Yeah.
once an artist has an audience, they seem to be able to really turn that into a great monetary stream. Um, there's tools like Crates, Crates out there that allow an artist to do pre-order campaigns on vinyl before printing so they can see how many they sell, so that can allow them to save money and even use the revenue from their sales to actually just pay for the printing itself. I love just different revenue streams. What I want to encourage artists though is like, if you're just getting started out, maybe don't spend a bunch of money making 1,000 records because you might be sitting on those for a long time. And I still have some records that I'm sitting on a lot of copies of in my storage unit.
How about you name a couple of those records so that people will go out and buy them?
Oh, dude. Well, transparently, come around like the late first decade of the 2000s, we ended up having to have a large number of CDs destroyed because they just weren't ever going to get moved out of our warehouse. Yeah. And every record label did. Every record label had to just destroy a huge number of CDs.
It's like
That's got to feel so terrible.
it's like Christian moms when they found out about secular music.
Yeah, a little bit. It's like, I mean,
it's like their heyday. They're like, this is our Super Bowl right now.
They're like, hire us,
yeah,
please.
I mean,
we'll do it for free.
The major labels wouldn't promote it, but they definitely destroy a huge number of CDs every year.
Wow.
It's just sort of the reality, or they try to sell them out for $1 each these days. Let's see, CDs, vinyl I've got at home. I'm just sitting on a bunch of records from this artist Blackpool. The record's so good. It's a really great vinyl record, but yeah, just sitting on some of those. What else is at home?
I think everything else. Cast by any chance?
So I was going to say everything else I've got at home is like my collector version of it, right? So I do have like 10 Appleseed Cast, Peregrine, but they're mine. They're like, or Sagar Matha. Those are the 2 records I did. So those are the ones I just kept for myself. But
understandable.
I know that there are sites online. I do get surprised sometimes. Someone will send me a link to a record or a CD I put out, and like it's going for like some stupid price on like eBay. And I was like, man, I've got 20 of those in my warehouse. Like, but I don't know. I know other people I've worked with have tried to sell all their collectibles. I still can't part with mine. I still have sentimental attachment to them. So,
well, that's good.
I keep it all. Yeah, I love the music.
I'm curious. Let's say you get an artist that comes to you and says like, hey, I'm so frustrated with this. I can't seem to figure out what my stream is, what my niche is here. How do I make this somewhat of a living?
Yeah.
How do you convince them to think a little bit more outside the box, outside of like that streaming and physical media landscape? Like if they're not selling there, but they still have like a following, how do you convince them to, or how would you convince them to think differently?
I mean, every artist and niche is different, right? So it's going to be different for everyone. It's really going to be custom based on where they're at in their career, what they've accomplished, where they're stuck at. And oftentimes, I always describe the music industry as like, you like start out and then you hit like a ladder and it bumps you up to like the next plateau. And then you feel like you're grinding on the plateau for a while. And then boom, something good happens and it gets you to the next. And it's kind of the step ladder experience. And those ladders could be a tour, it could be like a sync, could be a playlist, could be a media coverage. And that's just sort of the nature of the game. it's one of those industries that doesn't function like any other traditional business. It's not like you have a product and you market that product and maybe people buy it. It's subjective because it's art and music. And so if the artist is good and writes good music, it always starts with the music, then my encouragement to them would be to like just continue to drop regularly. What seems to work right now, and it might change in a year or two, is artists dropping monthly. You drop a song every month and just go hard at it on creating organic content on socials that reuse that same like 15-second clip and sort of re-hit that. And the artists that continue that strategy for like over a year or two will just slowly, it'll start ticking up slowly, and then it just seems to speed up. I've seen it with a couple artists lately. An artist called Koki, Coqui. He just crossed like 100,000 followers on Instagram, an amazing artist out of LA. Another artist named Jimmy Clifton. He's like a kind of a rootsy Americana singer guy. He just crossed 270,000 monthly listeners. And these are independent artists making thousands of dollars a month from their music, doing it all themselves. Like, this is possible. This is the one encouragement I do want to give to artists. A lot of artists are like, I can't do this. The streaming era is like, gonna screw me, or the industry sucks. I can't make it work. It's like, dude, 15,000 artists are making tens of thousands of dollars from streaming that are independent artists. So it is possible. You just got to use the strategies that have an impact today.
Yeah.
Well, and it always seems to come down to like, are you making art that is compelling? Like, people, for whatever reason, are just interested in, right? That's what it seems to come down to. Is obviously there are always going to be those artists, and I've got those artists in my life where I'm like, they should have just been way bigger. But at the end of the day, if you're making really compelling art, people will find it, I think.
Yeah, I think in general that is true. You just don't have to have any expectations of success in a weird way.
Right.
It's like, make the art, make the music. Like Rick Rubin would say, like, make it so that you love it. And that's the success. You made something you love, And in the end of the day, if other people gravitate towards it, great. But oftentimes, like, even marketing can't change that. It's just the song is going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah. Something I'm also interested in. Miltia Group never had like that band that just broke into like the absolute stratosphere, right? But there were so many bands on Miltia Group that just rode very, very high. We're like, let's say like Tooth and Nail, for instance, right? Tooth and Nail had a lot of bands. They signed a lot of bands, and I would say 1 out of 5 had a somewhat of an impact in the scene. It seemed like with Miltia Group, it was like 3 out of 5. What was the difference like with your ears, where you're like, this band's gonna do it, I know it because I can feel it?
I don't know. It's funny. The first thing that comes to mind is like the artists that we almost signed, that we like barely missed out on, like
the White Wolves,
like
right?
Fall Out Boy or Taking Back Sunday. Like, these were deals that we should have had done, but we didn't get done. And, the rest is history. Right. But, I don't know. We were like, honestly, I look back and I just think like, man, I was just a kid in a candy shop having a lot of fun. I really didn't think about it too seriously about like our ears or what we liked.
Sure.
I think in some respect, maybe we had a little bit of, even though we didn't have stratospheric success, we had a little bit of success really early. And maybe that even affects how you think you should run your business. I think part of me, I was 21, 22, 23 by the time everything was kind of crushing. And my personality or my taste in music was changing rapidly, as we all are when we're 19 to 23 years old. So I found myself having had a lot of success in sort of what I'll call pop punk or emo, but really only wanting to work with like indie rock or like Interpol sounding bands out of New York, but then not wanting to work with me because I've got a pop punk label. It's like, so I'm like stuck, like, You know,
That's
I
the
had
one
success.
downside of starting a record label when you're 20, right?
Yes, that was definitely a downside. It's kind of like, you know, I think about the artists that might have blown up when they're 17 and then they're 35 and they're still playing that song. You know, they wrote when they were 17. Like, kind of felt
Talking about getting their heart broken by a girl in the
yeah,
backseat of a car.
it kind of felt a little bit like that sometimes. And you know, the wise business decision would be to just continue to put out like teenage pop punk, but you know, we were struggling with our own self identity and what we wanted to do. And you know, I think like any label, sometimes they have a heyday and then it just kind of fades a bit. And again, for me, I think I just got a little bit burnt out. Like at some point, like I was like, oh, I got married and my family life became way more important to me than my identity, you know, running a
Right.
record label or being in the music industry. But
that's admirable.
Yeah.
Thanks,
I,
man.
I will say, I mean, like I mentioned before, you know, Militia Group, there are so many bands that just were so important to me and have been so important to me, like Appleseed Cast. You know, those couple albums that you did with Appleseed Cast have been such incredibly important albums in my life. Copeland is one of my favorite bands ever. And as well as, you know, I still remember listening to Cartel on Madden. You know, I remember
Oh,
some
yeah.
of that. And
That was a
yeah, I
good
mean,
stink.
just, yeah, there's just so many cool, you know, close connect, or even, you know, even it was probably one of your lesser known bands, but the Beautiful Mistake is, I feel like, a very
Oh, really?
underrated
Yeah,
band.
Yeah, very good
And
band.
so
Yeah.
there's just so many bands that I grew up listening to and thinking, you know, this is just incredible that there's this record label. And I'm like, how are they not as big as Tooth and Nail? And maybe you guys were, I don't know, but like just in my understanding as a kid that was growing up in the Christian world, youth group culture, I'm like, this doesn't seem to be as big as Tooth and Nail, but also like these bands are incredible.
Yeah,
As good or better.
I don't know if we reached I would say like maybe gross revenue that Tooth and Nail reached. Brandon probably ran a tighter ship than we did. But he also had like the CCM hits, right? Like the Jeremy
Right.
Camps of the world. And from my impression from the outside, that kept the lights on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you wish that you would have done CCM hits?
You know, what's funny is like, not that I wish I would have, but at this stage in my life, like I actually listen to that music because I have kids now and I can't listen to like everything at home. So we'll put on CCM or country, and we actually have a country artist on our company, Good Morning, that's crushing it right now on like multiple playlists on Spotify and Apple Music. So
who's that?
Oh, his name's Drew Taylor.
Drew Taylor. All right.
Yeah. So I haven't really talked about it, but all my experience has now been kind of merged in with a few of us. We merged it into this company called Good Morning Music earlier this year. And one of our projects is Slow Tide, but we work with, which is Spencer from Under Oath, but we also work with now thousands of different artists, all the way at like a self-release, like early stage level. They can just sign into our website. They can distribute music. They can publish songs. But then we have partnerships with more established artists or companies to provide them with distribution and back-end administration services, just helping make sure they collect all their rights. So, so with that, you know, I have conversations with sort of this new crop of indie rock Christian artists, which I'm kind of passionate about and been pretty excited about. Koki is one of them, Coqui. You should check it out. It's amazing.
Okay.
But there's a lot of artists kind of coming out of that lane, like Beach Chapel, Living Again. It's like this Southern California, like Christian indie rock revival. It reminds me of like Tooth and Nail days and maybe the early 2000s.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I love it.
Should we do top 5, Cullen?
Top 5,
Let's
man.
do it.
Let's do it.
Bro. Okay. I might need a little bit of time, but let's see. I'll put Cigaros in brackets. That's one of my favorite records.
Oh,
sweet.
So
yeah,
great.
we're big post rock fans here.
Cool. Yeah. My oldest son's name is Jonesy, and
really okay.
And so
you're committed.
I thought it was going to be Sigger.
Well, I'm a big fan. My wife isn't as big of a fan, but it was a name we could agree on, so it worked out. So that was cool.
Wow, you're committed to the bit, the Cigaros bit.
Does he speak gibberish as well?
He speaks Hopeland. Yeah, I'm actually like I love Cigaros. I think they're like they're probably like they're just beautiful. This just utterly beautiful music. So I would say Bob Dylan. I was trying to pick my favorite record from Bob Dylan, but it'd probably be one of his gospel albums, like Slow Train Coming. I don't know if you guys knew that era of Bob Dylan, but it was
Hey,
classic.
Slow Train Coming's great.
So it's a sick record. What's interesting, what came to mind is Neutral Milk Hotel. Kind of this classic indie rock band. Their album In the Airplane, Over the Sea.
In the Airplane, Over the Sea.
Okay, is the on the cover, is that do you think that's a drum or a potato slice?
Oh,
because I've heard both arguments made.
I think it's a coconut.
I'm looking at it now. I cannot tell you. I'm gonna have to think about it a bit more. I'm gonna lean on not a drum. It looks more like a potato to me.
Yeah, doesn't it kind of look like a potato?
Like
I don't know why. I always thought it was a coconut.
Well,
I don't see a coconut. I don't see like anything resembling a coconut milk in there. Though,
Maybe it's just because I'm putting like coconut and coconut milk together.
Yeah,
you know how it goes.
I'm a big gospel record guy.
There's no potato milk,
and this record might get me canceled, but I love the Kanye West gospel album.
Really?
I do. I love it.
Interesting.
It's what is it called?
What do you love about it?
Yo, man, it's so creative. Oh my gosh. It's hard to like, it doesn't sound like traditional gospel music, clearly. It doesn't sound like traditional is the wrong word, like modern hip hop. It's this sort of combination of both. But if you go and listen to the song structure and how it flows, it's just really original and unique, and it's something I can play for my kids. Again, no cursing in it. I'm not condoning anything about the person of Kanye West.
You can separate the man and the music.
He's a unique individual, whatever. But yeah, that record it's really special. I think it's really special personally for me. And then if I was to go.
I was about to say, I remember when that album came out, and Kanye just was like so Christian on his social media, and I still remember this tweet. I've got it saved, but it was this person tweeted, "Kanye West acts like Jesus went on vacation and left him in charge," and I'm like, that's exactly how this guy's promoting this album right now.
Yeah, he again, like he's very unique. Like, is he? I'm not here to to speak on that. I just thought the music's really wonderful. Maybe, I don't know if it's top 5, but it's up there. I for some reason just really, really like it. And then let me go through the stuff that I used. If I was to throw in one other one, I'm leaning towards gospel records. I don't know. I didn't mean to, but I just love it.
That's all right. If you love it, you love it.
Do you know what I love? I love Sufjan Stevens' Christmas albums.
I think of course.
Interesting.
Yeah. They're timeless. I think he somehow nailed the timeless sound. And I love that. I mean, I know I'm going top 5. He probably is going to cut me off, but I'm just looking at records I've listened to over the years. Further Seems Forever, The Moon Is Down, to me is still transcendent in time. I think Coalesce, their EP called You Can't Kill Us All, or Functioning on Impatience is legendary. There's so much legendary music, but those are some of the records that have influenced me in my heyday.
I dig it. I love it.
Great list. That's what I would expect from the Miltia Group, honestly.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
So, Rory, what do you want to plug? Obviously, got Good Morning going on. What do you
Good
want
Morning
to talk
music.
about Good Morning?
So, we really wanted to start these really great songwriting sessions with Good Morning Music, and we're looking at doing a country one in Nashville with Drew Taylor. But we've also we've connected with this guy in Northern California, and he's actually started these music sessions. It's going to sound crazy, but it's on record. You can actually listen to this. He started these musical sessions with what appears to be like a group of Bigfoot in Northern California.
What?
And so we started this program called the Sierra Sounds, where it's a songwriting retreat in Northern California. And what we do is we make sure that you're at a safe distance from the big feet or Sasquatches, and you can bring all sorts of stringed or wind instruments is what we prefer, nothing plugged in. But we found that when you're late at night performing in a certain rhythm, you'll actually hear the Big Feet participate in drumming on the trees about a mile or two away in the specific area. So it's safe, it's protected. It's a magical experience where you get to interact with these unique creatures. You know, are they spiritual?
It just sounds like a Sugaros concert, honestly.
Yeah, it could be. It could be, you know.
Do they sing as well? Is what I want to know. Like, is there?
It's more like screaming. It's more like death hardcore metal mixed with like a mountain lion scream level.
Wow,
screaming. Yeah,
but all acoustic.
Yeah, you don't want to plug in. If you plug in, they'll start throwing pebbles, and those pebbles will turn into rocks, and you know, they're definitely telling you to like, hey, this is.
They like think that you're Nickelback.
Yes. Yes.
That's a deep cut. That
is a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. But they, you know, they don't believe in borders, these Big Feet. You know, they are clearly, you know,
neither do I.
Socialist or communist, because they just go over the border between Canada and the US pretending like it doesn't exist.
I love it.
Just like how, you know, Canada and the US were in the 1980s. They still think it's still the 1980s.
And what's amazing on our next trip, which is planned for April, we're actually going to have Dr. Jeff Meldrum join us, and he's the foremost Bigfoot
That's
expert
a deep cut because he's at Boise State.
He's at
your Bigfoot. Your Bigfoot
in Pocatello, and he's the world's foremost expert. So he's actually we're going to go Bigfoot print hunting with the foremost expert in Bigfoot print hunts. And we're going to actually see and learn the difference between real Bigfoot prints and also the fake ones, because this man is an expert in animal feet. And so he can tell you exactly like what looks fake and what looks real that none of us could even see because we don't have a PhD in his expertise.
Interesting.
Wonderful trip. Make music with Bigfoot. What's great is we're actually also going to record it and put it on DSPs. And what's wonderful is through Good Morning Music, we can actually automatically split the royalties so that the Big Feet community actually get their royalties directly. You don't have to talk to them to get their royalties.
You know, anytime I talk about Bigfoot or I hear about Bigfoot, all I can think about is a Mitch Hedberg bit where he says, you know, has anyone ever thought that maybe Bigfoot's just blurry?
Yeah, just blurry. He's just blurry. Yeah.
I just got to think that that's maybe true, you know?
Possibly, man. Possibly.
Well, you might get the chance to figure that out if you go on one of these trips. So,
oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, you do have to sign waivers. Over 18, only males, by the way. Female humans, for whatever reason, it attracts the Big Feet to come closer, and we don't want that. Their mind speak is quite powerful, so their mind speak has been known to really get inside the minds of particularly female species in the human race, and it affects the writing capability. So we want to make sure that we're writing something natural and not stealing from the Bigfoot mind speak.
Is it like the Night Stalker's dog? Is it like that kind of mind speak?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, we look forward to more Bigfoot songs out in the world. But more than anything, we're just super stoked that you decided to come and hang out with us and chat a little bit about your involvement in the kind of business side of music and kind of hearing a little bit about Miltia Group. Again, you know, a lot of those bands that Cullen and I grew up were Miltia Group bands. So it's just cool that, like, in some way, shape, or form, you have had a connection with Cullen and I for quite some time. So super cool to connect with you and chat a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's power music. We love it. I'm so glad you guys are out there still promoting these artists and sharing deeper insights on musicians that we love. It's great for everyone, great for us. We love it. Thank you so much.
You bet. One last thing. Are you going to Furnace Fest 2024?
Ooh. I really meant to go the last couple of years, but with kids, it makes it a little bit hard. And my wife I try to explain to my wife, like, babe, I put out records from bands that people loved. I promise, like, this happened. And she like doesn't really understand it because she didn't come up in the scene. But yeah, maybe I can pull her out to that. It'll be interesting to see who Chad books this year. Chad and Mike.
I've been hearing a lot of buzz around Cartel potentially coming. So,
dude, Cartel.
Well, they were there a couple years ago.
They were there a couple years ago, but people want them back. So
I really want Slow Tide to play.
Yeah,
that
let's
would
make
be
that happen.
awesome. That would be great.
Spencer feels it's like this alt project, and like Furnace Fest is too hardcore. And I'm like, no,
No, it's
dude,
perfect
like
for it.
they would crush it. Like Slow
Yeah.
Tide would do so well at Furnace Fest. So
Mhm.
Well,
make it
perfect example. Mason and I both agree that the best show we've seen at Furnace Fest is Appleseed Cast, and that's not
Oh,
super
sick.
heavy either. So,
Oh, yeah.
like that
Dude.
was an insane experience.
Awesome.
I don't know what it was. It was the best.
Those guys, they can do some really special stuff live.
Definitely.
They're fun.